OMG, what an episode we got installed for you today. It's with Sonya and Julie, who are Unreasonable Hospitality coaches, and they're going to lead us through some more details from that book. And it's part of a series we're going to at least have an attempt to introduce. But they're really fun, and there's great information in this podcast. But before you do that, can you go to the show notes and look up for Sam Shea's campaign to get co-working recognized on LinkedIn? At the moment, if you go to, we'll link to the podcast also in the show notes, but if you go to LinkedIn, there is facility services or hospitality or real estate, but there's no co-working category. And all the work we do in the co-working industry is kind of invisible on LinkedIn. If you're looking for a job, it's really hard to get searched. It's just every reason you can think of, but I've only got like a few seconds for this intro to have LinkedIn recognized as a category is there. So click the link in the show notes, add your name to the list, and let's get into the show. Hello, folks, and welcome to yet another Unreasonable Co-working Values podcast. I am over the moon to have Julie and Sonya in the studio today. I'm staggering that intro because I just want to get into it. So, Julie and Sonya, what are you known for? What would you like to be known for? Julie goes first because we always like faff that bit up.
Okay, the pressure's on. What do we like to be known for? Well, essentially, we run a marketing agency, but our marketing agency, Story 22, is a little bit different in that I like to think that we are very human focused. So we are focused all on the customer. And as part of our journey in delivering strategic marketing to our customers, we happened across Unreasonable Hospitality and felt like this was a really, really good fit for our business and what we're trying to deliver in terms of value. And I'll let Sonya explain why.
Yeah, so the part of the reason for that is that we really see kind of customer service and that valuing of customers and the retention of customers as part of marketing. And actually, you know, a good part of marketing is to really be thinking about the customer's whole life cycle. And, you know, that quite often we find is overlooked in organizations about that retention of customers and the things that you can do differently. And actually, for us, we're in a very fortunate position that we focus our marketing through the lens of StoryBrand. And what that tends to mean is that we work with businesses who are really focused on delivering something that's really important to their customers. And so we work with really nice businesses. And kind of this unreasonable hospitality side of things works really nicely with those customers because they're thinking about how they can elevate that customer's journey and how they can make the experience that they offer, both in acquisition, you know, making sure that the customer understands the problem they help them solve, but also then in retention, in understanding their customers' problems and thinking about ways they can elevate that experience throughout kind of different touch points that the customer goes through.
That is, what is it about this? Like this hospitality word has been all over the co-working industry for, I'd say, about 5 years now. And people always talked about it before that. And I grew up in hospitality, but we used to call it catering, and now it's hospitality suddenly. And I always saw this. I mean, we said this in the last podcast. Actually, this when I'm in a co-working space and it's all happening, it feels like being in a restaurant that's like where it's all happening too. And there's micro relationships with people who are in the room and everything like that. And what is it about when you have to make that like business hospitality connection? Because we say the art of hospitality, but in a like specifically in this co-working context, but it might be easier to explain it in a business context. What is hospitality?
Shall I pick that up, Julie? I think actually there's a number of reasons why this has shifted in the last few years. And actually, let's really reframe kind of hospitality as thinking about what it would be like if you welcome someone into your home. So that is the art of hospitality, isn't it? How do you make people feel welcome? How do you make them feel valued? How do you make them feel taken care of? So it's not hospitality in, you know, we talk about pubs and restaurants as hospitality. It's much more about how you're making people feel, like the value that you're putting on, the experience you give them. And actually, as we move into a more automated world, a world where AI, is easy to use, and we have processes that remove us from our customers much more. the art of hospitality, of making people feel seen, making people feel welcome, becomes more important. We value that more as humans. And also, I think that it allows us to differentiate ourselves from other people. So as businesses, unless you can kind of embed this ability to make your customers feel seen, feel heard, feel valued, you are risking them going to somewhere else that is better, cheaper, faster. And that's always going to be the case. There's always going to be someone who comes along who does something a little bit better, a bit faster, a bit cheaper than you. And then you're going to be chasing your tail. But if you can elevate this hospitality, this way to make people feel valued, then actually they're not chasing the quickest, fastest, next thing that's released. They feel like they're on a journey with you and they're taken care of.
Do you want to add anything, Julie?
Yeah, I just want to just pull back to StoryBrand for a minute, actually. I think one of the key things why we like the way that these two go together, these two different approaches and frameworks together, is because StoryBrand really looks at your customers' problems. And if you just took a co-working space as one example of a business, we believe Unreasonable Hospitality is applicable across any business. But in this context, if you took a co-working space, what's the actual problem that you solve there? And that's going to differ from one site to another site, from one co-working business or brand to the next one. But each one is going to have an individual personality. Each one's going to have a different target audience. And each one's going to deliver the answer to a different problem. And it's only once you really understand the challenge, the problem that your customers face, that you understand how to respond to that with the hospitality that helps them to feel like they belong, like they found the right solution to what they're looking for. And just in some of the work that we've done previously with you, Bernie, we've seen those different personalities come through when we've been talking to the owners or the managers of the sites. Like one of the site managers we chatted to said that people want a home from home. They want to feel like they belong somewhere. They're fed up of working on their own in a bedroom somewhere. They go to this place for this very strong sense of community and a homely sense of community. And that's going to be a very different feeling that people get from being in a co-working space, which is perhaps much more tech focused, or at scale up businesses that need a more professional surrounding. And how you respond to those different needs is going to be very individual. So I think that this hospitality is about personalization. It's about really understanding your customers' needs. And we're not a group of people. We have individual needs, even within one co-working space, even if you've got people who work in the same sector, everybody's going to have different needs. And the way that the answer to success is really taking the time to understand your members, I think.
And how do you so I mean, this has happened to me. Is I read so many books. Like with StoryBrand, I read it and it was the first out of all the books I've read about story, which are very interesting. It's the first book I read where I thought, oh, I get that. I can go and apply that in my business right away. And I've met people and I've sat around tables and had chats about it, like, oh my goodness, this Unreasonable Hospitality book is amazing. And then, I mean, I've never sat down and said, so after reading that, Cuthbert, how much of that could you apply in your business right away? But how do people take that book and put it into action in their business? I mean, that's a very big question, folks, but like where to start is what I meant to ask, because that's a much more sensible question.
Yeah. Should I pick this one up?
Yeah, sure.
So I think the first thing to say is this can very quickly be and feel overwhelming when you think about the touch points that your members have inside a co-working space. There will be hundreds and hundreds of them, and to try to tackle this as one big project is kind of setting yourself out to fail from the start. So when we're working with customers through the workshop, one of the things that we talk about is look at your priority touch points. Maybe you've got areas where you might have challenges, and then start to laser in on those. And once you understand the process that you go through, then you can just roll that out across other areas of the business. So in any one workshop, we might focus on half a dozen different touch points and really pick those apart. And so first of all, why do they matter? Let's understand that touch point. What's happening leading up to that particular touch point? That could be when they arrive through the door. It could be when they're greeted by someone at reception. It could be when they go and order a coffee. It could be when they use the facilities. It could be in the kitchen. There's a whole different range of touch points there, and we pick it apart in minute detail to see what's getting overlooked here. So it could be the most mundane touch points, like going to the toilet, that we just think it's just a toilet, it's just a facility that you meet in any other place, but it could be a really important one. And worked with a client recently, and some of their surveys that came back highlighted that the toilet area was something that was important to their members. So we did some work around that to discuss how you can manage that situation better if you making sure that everything's always stocked up. How do you include a reporting facility if something does get overlooked? So I think that this isn't about going in and immediately creating these exceptional over-the-top moments, the wow moments. This is about looking at it through the scale. So through what are the basic points that we may be overlooking at the moment? How can we very quickly get some quick wins there? And then where do the opportunities lie for those standout moments to build that on top? But with any touch point, no matter how mundane it might appear from the beginning, you can create an outstanding moment from that. And I think that's where people get that wrong. People think that this is about all of the incredible, awesome, audacious stuff, but actually this is about getting the basics and uplifting that as well.
I really agree with that. I've heard more than one like owner managed co-working space. Like they frequently say some form of how can I compete with that when they look at like big shiny brands and stuff like this who have, I can't think of anyone. Beyoncé, come and do the closing Christmas party. And they're like, we were going to do like a round table with some avocado on toast. Like, isn't everyone else going to go there? Sonia, what do you think about that? Not the avocado on toast.
Beyonce. I love avocado on toast.
Beyonce, avocado on toast, but like, let's bring it back to co-working just to serve our audience in the way we promised. It's all about the brand promise, Sonia.
Well, I think there's a couple of different things there. Beyonce definitely is going back to the book, is the sledding in the park, isn't it? That is an exceptional, like, standout thing that is great to have in if you've got the budget and you've got the contacts. However, a lot of places don't have that, and actually some of the work that we do is not about kind of these absolutely kind of crazy things that Will Goodell talks about in the book. They are about overlooked touch points. They're about things that we do in the everyday, and they don't have to cost a lot of money. And I think going back to the book again, if you think about some of the examples he gives, he talks about, we observe whether the customer is left-handed, and then if they're left-handed, we come and switch their knives and forks around with them on the second course. And that's massive, and that doesn't cost anything, but what it does is elevates shows to the customer that you are valuing their experience and you're thinking about them. And I think some of the stuff that we do with clients is about how you think about those overlooked touch points or those negative touch points that happen. So it could be every month that they get their bill through, that's a negative touch point. There's an opportunity for them to feel, what am I paying this money for? Am I getting value for it? So how do you take that negative touch point and make it something that is of value? And again, going back to the book, Will Goodell talks about, bringing the bottle of cognac over. But, you might not have been to, a fancy restaurant where they bring cognac over, but you probably have been to the Happy Eater where they gave you a lollipop, or to a
Happy Eater.
the restaurant where they give you a mint, and that is that same thing. It's about you're giving someone a mint or a chocolate to offset that kind of we're handing you a bill at the same time.
Can we dive into the cognac thing there, because I think that's even cleverer than I think you just like short sold it, is because the cognac and the bill, it cushions the blow of the bill, but it's also about the rushing thing.
Well, exactly. And, Will Guidara talks about, at length in his book, that the challenge is in a restaurant that, you don't want to bring the bill over, because it makes it feel to the customer that you are trying to get rid of them. They've just spent a lot of money on a meal, and that it feels as if you're pushing them out. But equally, you don't want to have to wait for the customer to ask for the bill, because then it looks like you're not serving them properly. So the way that Will Guidara, kind of overcame that is that he delivered the bill, which, this is a very fancy restaurant, so the bill was quite high, and there would have been some bill shock in there as well. So he overcame that negative experience by also delivering a bottle of cognac, where he left the bottle of cognac on the table and then served a measure to each of the people at the table and left the bottle there, which did two things: signaled, we value you. You feel free to stay as long as you want, and pour yourself, more drinks, and, stay and enjoy yourself, and equally allowed them to deliver the bill without the customer having to ask. So it put the customer in control about what the next steps were, but also it very cleverly overcame this potentially negative touch point of delivering the bill too soon or not delivering it soon enough.
Yeah, when I worked in a restaurant, like basically, there was the money the business made, because that's how much each table paid. But then, like, I worked at this incredibly busy restaurant in the city, which was like amazing. Basically, it was Monday to Friday, amazing tips, and if you could, very rarely could you do it, but if you could turn the restaurant 4 times in lunch service, that was amazing, because the amount people left, you got 4 tips from a table instead of 2 tips, and you had to get people in and out as quickly as possible. And it would have, most people came down from their offices, ate, and they ate, they shot, and they left. But other people didn't want to be rushed. But we were more intent on getting them in and out as quickly as possible than we were what we just explained in that thing there. I'm not sure where you can go with that. That just popped in my head as I was thinking about the bill. Can you? One story I love from that book, which I'm sure people who know the book have heard 100 times, is the hot dog thing. And I thought that was really inexpensive and very well thought through.
Yeah. Do you want us to explore that in terms of what that looks like in reality, and how do we put that into practice? I think this kind of comes back to personalization again. This is about seeing your customers, seeing who they are and what their needs are, and then going back to that problem again, understanding what their problem is and how you can best serve them. So in the hot dog example, they hadn't experienced a New York hot dog, a typical traditional New York hot dog. And that was a problem. They were going to go home from New York feeling disappointed that there was a gap there. So they spotted the problem, first of all, and then they looked at how they could make this into a very personal experience for them. They didn't do this for the whole restaurant. This wasn't something, the process that they'd rolled out, this was unique to this particular table. And this is really where the responsibility of leadership in organizations is to empower your teams to be able to, first of all, spot these moments and to be able to respond in the moment to them. And not everybody has that. They don't have the confidence to do that. They don't have the mandate to do that. So without that in place, you're always going to be restricted on what you can and what you can't do there, because you do need to be able to respond in the moment. And we had a really good example recently where there was a client of an organisation who was inviting some investors in for a meeting, and they wanted to appear as a very professional big outfit, and they needed some support from their team. They had, other members of the team off site, but they weren't on this particular site. So the team in the co-working space took it upon themselves to act as members of their team, which in essence they were. They were their back office team. It was just that they were doing it on a fractional basis, if you like. So they looked the part, they dressed the part for this, and that's going over and above. It didn't cost anyone anything. They were still doing their normal job, but they presented as part of that team. They understood the client's problem, and they responded to that. And that is what unreasonable hospitality is. It's spotting these opportunities to jump in there and solve those problems in a way that perhaps we wouldn't even think to ask, because we would never have that expectation that someone would be prepared to do that for us. And I think that's what makes this really, really special.
There's where is the line? Like, even before this book came along, I was thinking this. There's places, in co-working and in hospitality I've worked where, and I've worked with people, and I think the answer might end up being it's the people. But I worked in the Mayfair Intercontinental Hotel in the 90s, and even though that was a huge chain and there was a lot of staff in that building, a lot of staff had worked there a very long time, and they were kind of just committed to the whole thing and each other. And all these little things happened every day that were wow moments or unreasonable hospitality moments. And it wasn't, I'm sure some things were gimmicky, but it wasn't gimmicky. And then I go over to other places and it feels very transactional. I'm giving you this little thing and you have to smile because, it's in the social contract that when I give you a mint when you leave the Happy Eater, you got to be happy because you're getting a free mint, And
Lollipop,
lollipop.
Gosh.
And the lollipop might be more nutritious than the food we just sold you. But what's that line between gimmicks and like genuine special moments?
Well, I think the thing about gimmicks is that gimmicks are there just for the sake of it. So that it's either a PR thing or that you are doing it to actually make somebody's experience better. And that's a genuine thing, isn't it? So, I read, I can't even remember which book it's in. It might have been in the Diary of a CEO, but, he talks about an office that had a slide in it. And actually that could have been gimmicky unless it was really linked to the experience of the people working there. And I think, that is the difference about that hospitality. Going back to what we said earlier, hospitality is making people feel valued and seen. And if you go back to kind of the very beginning of the Unreasonable Hospitality book, it talks about that Maya Angelou quote, is that people will forget what you say, they forget what you did, but they never forget the way you make them feel. And that links into that hospitality. If the gimmick is something that elevates people's experience and it makes them feel something, then it's absolutely the right thing to do. If it's just done because it's put in place, that isn't the right thing to do. And I think we talk a lot when we're doing workshops. We give a lot of examples of when things have really touched people, and they and what the difference that makes. And often our experience of that is when employees feel really empowered and they feel that they have got the autonomy to make a difference to someone's day, and that that is hugely important. And one of the things that we talk about, actually, an experience that Julie and I had, is we were at a hotel in Scotland. It's called the George Hotel, really lovely hotel. I was running late for breakfast. I'd been to the gym, arrived at breakfast, ordered a coffee, and when the server came over to deliver my coffee, he had a tray full of coffees. and he gave me a coffee that I hadn't ordered. And I said, oh no, I didn't order that. I ordered a flat white. And he said, oh, I'm sorry, I've got it wrong. I said, don't worry. Took the coffee. It was no problem at all for me. I was in a hurry. I just needed to drink my coffee and go. So I had my coffee, and then I went up to my room because we had another meeting to go to. But this server had taken it so kind of valued my experience that he brought a cup of coffee up to my room, which is just next level kind of thinking about, the experience that I had as a customer. And so now I tell everyone about that experience because it made me feel really valued. It made me feel that he, took personally that the coffee I ordered wasn't the coffee I got. And even though I hadn't complained because it genuinely didn't upset me, when he delivered the flat white to me, I thought, wow, this is next level.
I love things like that. I used to get such a kick out of doing things like that. I worked in one restaurant, and this couple used to come in and order Corona and a margarita with no salt. And then I worked in another restaurant, and they came in, and it was really, really busy in the bar. And I just put their drinks in front of them. And the guy went like, how the fuck did you know that? And I went, oh, because, and he's like, oh my God, that. And it was tiny little thing. But I don't know.
They will have gone on and told half a dozen people about that moment. And I think that's the thing. And this is where it does tie back into the marketing of your business. You want people to be sharing these stories. So you've got to give them the stories to share in the first place. And that's a perfect example of that.
That's it, isn't it? That's how we're going to wrap it, Julie, is you have to create the story.
You do.
That's it. You're going to come in there, or shall I just leave us hanging? I was feeding you the line there, Julie.
Sorry, I thought you were finishing it off.
I'm joking. I'm joking about that. But that is the thing. If you make those little actions like the flat white and the margarita and a Corona, that gives people a story to tell. Whereas if everything's just, well, that's what I expected, there's not a story there.
Exactly. So it's finding those standout moments that aren't necessarily the audacious moments. They're those tiny little thoughtful underlined 3 times, those thoughtful gestures.
So, Julie and Sonya, where can we find you online? Where's the best place to connect with you and follow your work and get connected about Unreasonable Hospitality and StoryBrand and everything else in the Story 22 universe?
So you can find us at story22.co.uk. We've got a presence on LinkedIn, and we'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn as well. So you can find us under Sonya Whittam, which is SonyaWhittam, and Julie Firth. I don't know if I need to spell that one out.
It would really help.
You'd be surprised how many people get that wrong. It's Firth.
Thank you very much for that alliteration there. But I should have said before that we'll put links to the show notes. To where everyone can find them. I normally say that. We were so professional for the whole of this podcast, and now it's just like
just business as usual now.
It's business as usual. So, boys and girls, thank you for your time and attention today. If you go to the show notes, there is a link to Sam's Recognised Co-working on LinkedIn petition that she's doing with the future leaders of co-working. So please go and sign that. Last time I checked, there's only 400 people have signed it. So we'll be tracking down. And if you did that, that would actually help LinkedIn recognize the co-working industry, because at the moment it's in hospitality, which we've been talking about for this whole podcast, or real estate, and we want to own our category. There's also a link to the LinkedIn co-working group, and then we'll be back at the Workspace Design Show in the Business Design Centre in February 2026. Wherever you are in the world, be careful out there. It is a jungle.